Her shoulders were the first thing. The particular way they had pulled in, not slouched, not collapsed, but drawn toward the center of herself in the specific small motion of a woman trying to take up less space than usual, as though making herself smaller might make what she was feeling smaller too. She was sitting at the counter of a roadside diner on a Tuesday afternoon in September, and she had a cup of coffee in front of her and both hands wrapped around it, and her eyes were on the window, and she was doing the thing that people do when they are in a public place and do not want to be seen. She was being very still and very quiet, and she was losing. The tears were not falling. That was the effort. That was what it cost her. The stillness, the held breath, the jaw set and the eyes fixed on something out the window that she was not seeing at all. She was working, the way a person works at a problem that requires everything they have. She was working at not crying in a diner on a Tuesday. The man at the next table had already noticed. He had noticed 3 minutes before she sat down, when she came through the door and moved to the counter stool the way people move when they have chosen a public place specifically, because public places require you to hold it together, because holding it together was the only thing she had left to do with her hands. He had noticed the way she set her bag on the stool beside her, and then looked at the bag and moved it to the floor, because leaving a bag on the stool beside you is something you do when you are expecting company, and she was not expecting company. He had noticed the way she ordered, one word, coffee, and then turned to the window. He had noticed all of it, and he had not looked away, and he was not watching her with anything that was surveillance or pity. He was watching her the way a man watches something he recognizes. He knew what he was looking at. He had sat in rooms like this one, in a body doing exactly what hers was doing, and he had not expected anyone to see him, and no one had. He picked up his coffee. He considered. He put it down. He was going to have to say something. He had not done this before. He did not know if he could do it right. He knew he was going to try. The diner was called Patsy's, and it sat on Route 19 in Lewisburg, West Virginia, at the edge of a stretch of 2-lane highway that ran between 2 ridgelines, and it had been in the same building since 1961, and showed the particular wear of a place that had been continuously occupied for 63 years, by people who needed it. The counter stools with the vinyl, patched in 4 places. The pie case with its 3 rotating offerings and its handwritten labels in blue marker. The coffee urn that had been replaced twice, and the shelving behind it that had not. The windows were big and faced east, and in the afternoon they caught the September light in a way that turned the counter gold, and the steam from the coffee cups gold, and the dust motes in the air gold, and everything in the diner had the color of something that was old and still working. A radio on the shelf behind the counter played a country station out of Lewisburg, low enough to be atmosphere rather than music. Outside, the ridge to the east had started going red at the top in the way that ridges go in West Virginia in early September, before the lower elevations have caught up. The parking lot held 7 cars and 1 motorcycle, a 2006 Harley Electra Glide, dark green, with road dust on the lower fairings from 300 miles of riding that day. Max Sorrells had come in from Roanoke, heading west. No particular destination except the one he had been heading toward every fall for the past 6 years, which was the stretch of road through the Greenbrier Valley that his wife Patrice had said, on their last trip out here together, was the most beautiful road she had ever been on, and that she intended to ride it every fall for the rest of her life. She had ridden it twice. The 3rd fall, she had not been there to ride it. Mac rode it for her now. He did not explain this to anyone. It was not a thing that required explanation. He was 58 years old, out of the Roanoke chapter, and he had a face that had done a great deal of living and was not trying to look like it hadn't. He was broad and gray-bearded, and he had the particular stillness of a man who had finished grieving in the way you finish a long project. Not completely, not with a clear end date, but to the point where it had become part of the structure rather than the emergency. He sat with his back against the wall the way he always sat, boots on the floor, hands around the mug, watching the room with the automatic attention of a man who stopped being able to turn that off somewhere in his 40s. He was watching the door when she came in. Her name was Cora Ellen Marsh. She was 67 years old, and she had been driving on Route 19 for 4 hours before she pulled into Patsy's. Not because she was going anywhere in particular, but because 4 hours was how long she had been in her car before she admitted to herself that she could not go home yet. Home was a house in White Sulphur Springs, 12 miles east, where she had lived for 39 years with a man named Robert, who had, on the previous Sunday morning, told her over breakfast that he was leaving. Not that something was wrong, not that he wanted to talk about it. That he was leaving. He had packed 2 bags while she sat at the kitchen table, and he had carried them to his car, and he had driven away, and the house had been quiet in the way that houses are quiet when something that was in them for 39 years is no longer in them. She had not told anyone. Not her daughter in Beckley. Not her friend Paula, who called every Tuesday. Not the woman at her church who had a way of knowing things before you said them. She had sat in the house for 2 days, Sunday and Monday, and on Tuesday morning she had gotten in her car and driven west on Route 19 without a destination. Because staying in that house one more morning required something she did not have. She was not the kind of woman who cried in diners. She was, in fact, not much of a crier anywhere. Robert had once said, not unkindly, that she was the most composed person he had ever met, and she had taken that as a description of herself that she was willing to carry. She had composed herself through her mother's death and her father's long decline and the miscarriage they had not talked about enough, and the years when the children were small and the money was not, and all the ordinary private crises of a life. Composure was her habit and her protection, and she wore it the way she wore her good earrings, automatically, as a matter of self-respect. She had ordered her coffee and turned to the window and found, to her specific horror, that her eyes had other plans. She pressed her lips together. She held the cup tighter. She fixed her gaze on the tree line above the eastern ridge where the red had started at the top, which Robert had always loved. He would point to it every September, the same way every year, as though she might have missed it. And she made herself look at it, and she made herself breathe, and she was doing all right. She was managing. She was nearly through it. Then the waitress brought a piece of pie she had not ordered, and set it on the counter in front of her without a word. Cora looked at the pie. Then she looked at the waitress, a young woman named Deb who had been running the Tuesday shift at Patsy's for 3 years and who did not offer explanations for pie she set down unbidden. "From the gentleman at the corner table," Deb said. She nodded toward it and went back to the coffee urn. Cora turned slowly. The man at the corner table was looking at her, not with anything she could easily name. Not pity, not intrusion, not the look of someone performing a kindness they want credit for. He was looking at her the way a person looks at someone they recognize without having met. And when their eyes met, he simply nodded once, slowly, and looked back down at his coffee. Cora looked at the pie, apple, with the crust done the way Patsy's always did it, thick at the edges, fork crimped, with a light wash that gave it a particular shine in the afternoon light. It sat on a white plate with a fork beside it, and it was just sitting there. And it was the most direct, uncomplicated act of kindness she had received in 4 days. And she was not ready for it. She was not going to be able to hold this together. She understood that now. Something had given way, very quietly, beneath the pie. She picked up the fork. Her hand was trembling. She ate one bite. She set the fork down. She pressed both hands flat on the counter and looked at the window and let it come. Finally, because it was going to come whether she was ready or not. And at least this way she was choosing it, and the choosing made it slightly more bearable. It was quiet. Not a sound, not a performance, just the shoulders dropping and the eyes closing, and 2 tears that she had been holding for 4 days finally finishing the work they had been trying to do. She was crying in a diner on a Tuesday. She had not thought this was who she was. She was finding out it was. The stool beside her scraped. She did not look up. She heard the movement, the weight of someone sitting, the particular sound of a coffee cup being set on the counter. And she understood what was happening, and she was not ready for it. And she was also, in some specific way she could not have explained to anyone, not entirely opposed to it. "I'm sorry to intrude," the man said. His voice was low and unhurried, the voice of someone who had thought about what he was going to say and had decided that less was more. "I don't mean to." Cora said nothing. She took a breath. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said, "and the first time I cried in public," he stopped. Started again. "I was at a gas station in Virginia, and I didn't know it was coming, and I couldn't stop it. And a man I didn't know bought me a cup of coffee and sat down and didn't say a word. And it was the most help anyone gave me that year." Cora pressed her fingers against the corner of her eye. "I'm not going to ask you anything," he said. "You don't have to say a word. I just didn't want you to be alone at a counter with bad news and nobody beside you." Cora looked at the window. The ridge was red at the top. The afternoon light was golden the way September light goes golden in the valley before it falls. "My husband left Sunday," she said. She said it to the window. "After 39 years. Mac did not say he was sorry. He did not say anything for a moment. "That's a long time to carry," he said. "Yes," she said. "Both of you," he said. "That's a long time for both of you." She had not thought of it that way. She did not know yet if she agreed with it. But something about the framing, "both of you," was different from how she had been holding it, and different from how every story she had ever heard about a man leaving was supposed to be held, and she sat with it for a moment. "I'm Mac," he said. "Cora," she said. They sat in silence for a while, the way people sit when the silence is doing work that talking cannot do. Deb refilled their coffees without being asked. The radio played something slow from the country station. The afternoon light moved across the counter. Cora ate the rest of the pie. She did not fall apart. That was the surprising thing. She had been bracing for it. The full collapse, the kind of crying that takes over a room and requires apology afterward. But it did not come. What came instead was something quieter, a slow settling. The way a room settles after a door has been left open and the temperature has finally equalized. She cried twice more, briefly, and each time Mac simply waited it out the way you wait out weather, present and unhurried, and each time the weather passed. He told her a little about Patrice, not much, the way men who have lost someone tell it, in careful portions, as though the loss is a resource that can be depleted by speaking it. He told her that Patrice had loved this valley in September, and that he drove through it every fall now, and that he had not expected to stop today, which was true. She told him a little about Robert, not the Sunday morning, not yet, that was too recent and too raw, but the before of it, the 39 years. The way he had always pointed at the ridge when the red started in September, the kitchen table she had sat at for 2 days that still had his coffee mug on the wrong side of the table because he had switched sides at some point in the last decade and she had never moved it back. She told him, "I don't know how to be in that house yet." He said, "You don't have to know yet. You just have to get through the first part." She asked, "When does the first part end?" He thought about it for a moment. "Differently for everyone," he said. "But it ends. That I can tell you. It ends." They were quiet again. Outside, the September afternoon was making its slow progress toward evening, the light going from gold to amber over the ridge. She was still at the counter when Mac paid his bill. She had been there for 2 hours. She did not feel the 2 hours the way she had felt the 4 hours in the car. Those had been dense and airless. The hours of someone trapped in her own company. These had been something else. He put on his jacket. He picked up his helmet from the stool where he had set it. He looked at her. "Are you all right to drive?" he said. She considered the question honestly. "I think so," she said. "In a few minutes." He nodded. 12 miles is short," he said. "But if you want to sit longer, Deb won't mind." He glanced at Deb, who was at the far end of the counter and did not look up but made a small gesture with her head that meant, "Correct." Cora almost smiled. It was the first thing that had come near a smile in 4 days. "Thank you," she said, "for the pie." "Thank the man at the gas station in Virginia," he said. "I've been waiting to return the favor for 3 years." He walked to the door. He put on his helmet. Through the diner window, she watched him swing onto the Electroglide and start the engine. A deep, settling sound, the kind that fills a moment rather than breaking it, and pull out of the lot onto Route 19, heading west into the valley. She watched until the taillight was gone around the first bend. She sat for a few more minutes. She finished her coffee. She looked at the pie plate, empty, and at the window, and at the ridge where the red had spread further down since she had come in. The autumn working its way from the top toward the bottom, the way autumn always worked in West Virginia, slowly, patiently, in its own time. She paid her bill and left a tip that was too large, and put on her coat and picked up her bag from the floor and went outside. She sat in her car for a moment with her hands on the wheel. 12 miles. She could do 12 miles. She could do more than 12 miles. She knew that now in a way she had not known it when she pulled into the lot. Not because anything had changed. Robert was still gone. The house was still quiet. Sunday morning was still Sunday morning, but because something that had been sealed had been opened. And open things can breathe, and things that breathe can move. She started the car. She drove home. Inside Patsy's, Deb cleared the counter. 2 plates, 2 coffee cups, 1 empty pie plate. She wiped down the space where they had been and stacked the plates in the rubber tub and carried it to the pass-through without hurrying, which was how Deb did most things, without hurrying, with the economy of someone who had been on her feet in this building for 3 years and had found the pace that made it sustainable. She looked at the corner table, which was also clean. Mac had cleared it before he left, stacked his mug and his water glass and his napkin at the edge the way people do when they want to make the next person's job easier. The small gesture of a man who noticed what work looked like. She had heard most of it. Diners have a way of carrying sound, especially in the slow afternoon when there are only a few people and the radio is turned to something quiet. She had not meant to listen, and had not been able not to. She had heard. 39 years. She had heard. Both of you. She had heard the particular quality of 2 people being honest with each other about grief, in a way that most people are never honest with anyone. Because the honesty only comes when the ordinary social context has been stripped away, and what is left is a counter and a window, and the afternoon going by. She thought about the gas station in Virginia. She did not know which gas station, which state, which year. She only knew that some man had sat down beside a grieving stranger and not said a word, and bought him a cup of coffee, and that man was now 3 years gone down Route 19, and that act was still moving. It had crossed state lines. It had crossed years. It had arrived in a diner in Lewisburg, West Virginia, in the form of a piece of apple pie set in front of a woman who needed it. And from that woman it had moved through the afternoon and settled something that had been unsettled, and now it was going to move again. She thought about the logic of that, the way it traveled, forward only, through people who had no way to return it to the source. She did not have a word for it. She did not think it needed one. That evening, when a man came in alone at the end of the dinner shift, and sat at the counter and ordered coffee and turned to the window with a particular stillness that Deb had come to recognize as the stillness of someone holding something they had not yet set down, she brought him a piece of pie he had not ordered. He looked at it, then at her. "From someone who wanted to," she said. He looked at the pie for a long moment, the way Cora had looked at hers. The look of someone registering an act of kindness at the moment when kindness is most needed and least expected, which is the moment it does the most work. "Thank you," he said. He ate it slowly, the way you eat something when you want to stay inside the moment it comes from. Deb went back to closing side work. The radio played. The last of the September light came through the big windows and went gold on the counter, and then amber, and then was gone. She tried to hide the tears. She almost made it. And the reason she didn't, the reason the holding gave way, was not because the grief was too large, though it was large, but because an act of unexpected decency broke the seal that shame had put on it. A piece of pie, set down without explanation. The difference between alone and not alone is, sometimes, exactly that small. Max Sorrells rode the Greenbrier Valley that evening, with the light going low over the ridges and the road doing what Patrice had said it did, which was show you everything at once, the river and the fields and the sky going orange between the tree lines. And he thought that she was right. She had always been right about the beautiful things, and that this valley was the same as it had always been, and he was not the same as he had been, and that both things were true, and neither one undid the other. He would come back next fall. He always did. If this story reached you, if you believe that seeing someone is sometimes the only help they need, share it with someone who needs a reminder that being noticed matters. Subscribe so you never miss the next story. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been seen at exactly the right moment by someone who didn't have to stop? Tell me what happened. Drop your city. I read every single one.